I've been married to Eric for 17 years. Together we have 2 children. Our eldest is away at college, while our youngest, Aaron, still lives at home. He turned 19 last fall. Gentle by nature, thoughtful, quiet but deeply empathetic. Our bond has always been strong, more like companions than the conventional mother-son relationship. Perhaps too close. And maybe that should have been the first red flag I chose not to see. Eric and I had been drifting apart for years, slowly but steadily. We were never hostile, just distant, cordial, functional, like 2 housemates raising children under the same roof. The warmth, the chemistry, the intimacy, it had vanished long ago. There wasn't one single cause. It was just the slow erosion of desire, time wearing down the edges, a kind of mutual resignation. One evening I came home from work completely drained, body aching from being seated all day, mind scattered. Eric was away on another one of his frequent business trips. Aaron was in the kitchen, fixing a snack for himself. We exchanged a few words. Casual, easy conversation, the kind that feels comforting because it's so ordinary. He noticed the way I winced when I moved. "You're sore again?" he asked gently. "Yeah. It's awful today," I replied, rubbing at my shoulder. "Want me to try something?" "I saw this video about deep tissue massage, supposed to help with muscle tension," he offered. Pause. It wasn't a strange suggestion. We'd always been affectionate in small, familiar ways. When he was a child, he used to crawl into bed beside me during thunderstorms. Physical closeness between us had always felt natural, unthreatening. So I agreed. I sat on the floor beside the couch while he positioned himself behind me. At first, it was exactly what I expected, tentative but sincere attempts to ease the tightness in my muscles. His hands were warm, his touch cautious. But then, something shifted. His movements slowed. The air seemed to grow heavier, like the room itself sensed the unspoken change. And I became aware, sharply, suddenly, of something hanging between us, something we both felt but didn't understand. I went still, not sure whether to move or speak. I convinced myself I was imagining it, that I was simply overtired, misreading everything. Then, just as quickly, he pulled his hands away. I turned to look at him. His expression was filled with guilt, maybe even shame. "I'm sorry," he muttered, standing abruptly and retreating to his room without another word. I sat there, stunned, unsure how to process what had just happened. My mind whirled, trying to rationalize, to minimize. I told myself not to dwell on it, that it didn't mean anything. But that night I couldn't sleep. Not because of what occurred, but because of how it made me feel. I had sensed his reaction before I turned around. And the part that unsettled me the most. I didn't feel repulsed. Instead, I felt noticed, wanted. And in the solitude of my bedroom, that realization crushed me with guilt, and something else I was too ashamed to name. The next morning we acted like everything was normal. And that became our silent agreement. Life resumed, but beneath the surface, something had shifted. A quiet tension started to grow. Aaron began avoiding being alone with me. I became overly conscious of what I wore around the house, how I spoke, how close I stood. I hated the thoughts I was having. I hated that I hadn't shut it down the moment things turned confusing. I hated myself for the ache I hadn't even realized I'd been carrying, and for how easily that moment exposed it. Then came the weekend. Eric was out of town again. Just the 2 of us at home. We decided to have a movie night. Something light to distract ourselves. We shared snacks, laughed together, sat on the couch. A little too close. At one point I reached for the popcorn. My hand brushed his. Froze. He didn't pull away. I glanced at him. In his eyes I saw uncertainty, fear, longing. And I recognized it because I felt it too. Nothing physical happened that night. But emotionally, a boundary cracked. And deep inside, I knew I had crossed a line I couldn't uncross. I found myself yearning for his attention, his presence. Not in the way a mother should, but in a way that revealed how hollow I had become inside my marriage. I began rationalizing it. telling myself that it wasn't serious, that nothing had actually happened, that it would pass. But the weight of my guilt made those lies crumble. Eventually, I started seeing a therapist. I didn't tell anyone. I just needed someone who wouldn't flinch or judge. Someone who could help me untangle what I couldn't say out loud. She helped me realize it wasn't really about Aaron. It was about me. About all the forgotten parts of myself that had withered in the silence of a loveless marriage. That night on the living room floor wasn't the start of something romantic. It was a mirror. And what I saw staring back at me terrified me. Later I sat down with Aaron. I apologized. Not for something we did, but for letting the emotional boundary between us blur. I told him how much I loved him. That I always would. But I admitted that I had leaned on him in ways no parent should, especially when it came to my own loneliness and neglect. He cried. So did I. We didn't speak of that night directly. We didn't have to. We both understood. Since then, we've drawn firmer boundaries. I stopped seeking emotional refuge in him. And I told Eric I wanted to separate. Not because of what happened with Aaron, but because I couldn't live in the hollow shell of our marriage any longer. That chapter, my marriage, is something I needed to let go of. And it had nothing to do with my son. There's no tidy conclusion to this story. No perfect moral. No neat redemption arc. I'm still facing the shame. Still sifting through the confusion. Still healing. And yes, I know some will judge me. Maybe they should. But I'm sharing this because I know there are women. Mothers, wives, quietly unraveling under the weight of unmet needs and unspoken sorrows. Women so emotionally starved, they begin to seek connection in the wrong places. What happened with Aaron wasn't about lust the way most would assume. It was about absence, loneliness, that haunting discovery that even the most sacred bonds can blur if you let your needs fester in silence. This isn't a justification. It's a warning. Emotional betrayal doesn't always look like secret messages or midnight phone calls. Sometimes it's the silence, the spaces between words, the aching longing to feel alive, even briefly. I'm rebuilding one step at a time. And part of that work is facing the darkest pages of my story. Not hiding them, not erasing them, but learning from them so I never let myself disappear that way again.